Get yourself in the lotus position, because I've got no plan, no pretense, and definitely no bypassing. I'm Josh Connolly, and this will probably be dysfunctional. So I feel like we are going to start the final podcast of 2024 with a couple of breaths. One, because it is Monday, the 30th of December when I'm recording this, and it is 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm in to get it done. I've already had some technical difficulties. So we're going to take a couple of breaths. We're going to do 3 of these, right? And we're going to do these by a double exhale through the nose. So that sounds like this. And then we're going to do a long exhale through the mouth. We're going to do that. And we're going to do that 3 times together. And then I'll officially start the podcast. So let's do that. Ready? In. Out. Try and trace those double inhales into the belly. And out. And in. And out. Three simple breaths. Give you a bit of a restart. Good way to start anything that you're doing. Good way to reground yourself in the middle of anything that you're doing. And just a good way to come back into the body. And I think when you truly understand the nervous system, something that I've been talking about, I was talking about yesterday in the recovery group that I go to, is everybody says, don't believe your thoughts. You don't have to believe your thoughts. And when you don't have to believe your thoughts, everything changes. I understand that. But now with the recognition that my thoughts are just my thoughts and being able to tap into becoming the part of myself that listens to the thoughts, I then realized that it's all about the body, because that kind of discomfort that I feel, that dis-ease that I feel in my body, that want to escape from it, I attach loads of different thoughts to it. I attach loads of different meanings to it. But actually, in most cases, it is a physical feeling. It's my body sending the signals, and then my brain does whatever it wants to do. So the idea that just like thinking my way out of it or rationalizing my way out of it is going to work alone, in and of itself, at least, it doesn't. I need the body work. When I'm able to tap into the power of the breath or just touching of my body, and there's lots of different things out there, right? From like, somatic tapping and all of these different things. But I actually just think that when we fully lean into our body, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that I'm sort of touching my heart, chest area. I do a lot of like just tapping and gently feeling into my body to remind myself that I'm in my body, to keep myself associated with myself rather than disassociating. And that definitely happens. Definitely happens to me as a human being regularly. I disassociate. The world feels too overwhelming for me. And, really all healing has done has helped me to fully enjoy the moments when life doesn't feel overwhelming. When I have a good day, I'm able to lean into it and just enjoy it, knowing that it will pass, and then the bad days will come. And I just don't think that you can feel things as deeply as I do and people like us do, and get to a place where the bad days don't feel heavy. They do, man. And when we are looking to escape our bodies, that's when we'll look for ways to put out the fire. We'll look for ways. Addiction is that putting out of the fire, right? I talked about it in the last episode when I talked about the food addiction. It's that this is so uncomfortable in my body, I will forget anything and just do whatever I need to do to get out of myself. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that. And if you don't, well then fucking good for you. So I've got a couple of bits of notes today because I thought it was New Year's. I thought I'd imagine there's loads of podcasts that are doing like New Year's resolutions and stuff like that. And I know that actually in today's world, you're supposed to either like love New Year's resolutions or hate them, because we live in a polarized world where it can't just be like, it could be a good opportunity to do a little reset if you need one. And I always do a little bit of one in the space of being off of like work for a while brings me that. And I talked a little bit actually recently online about this little gap between Christmas and New Year. And then I realized online everybody was talking about it and it's got a name, and then that makes me not want to talk about it at all. Because the rebel in me always wants to be a bit fucking different. But it can be a tricky time, man. Just that kind of like space that has no purpose and has no kind of destination or like meaning, can I say, to it, can be a little bit tricky. So I think a lot of people, certainly in the UK, are going back to work on the 6th of January. There'll be people going back in between in this little bit. And I think for some of us, although we might feel like we're devastated, we've got to go back to work, maybe doing a bit in between actually kind of in a funny way helps. So what I wanted to do is I have written down 5 hopes that if I had a magic wand, or if money and time weren't an object, didn't matter, what would I do if I was running, if I was prime minister and I was given a bit of a budget and given the time to make change in the world, what would lead that change for me in 2025? And I'm going to talk about the 5 things. And then I've got some questions around toxic parent stuff, dysfunctional family stuff, I think, that have come through on Insta that I've written down. So let's start with, so number one, I would hope for us as a society that we would look at ways to re-establish community, proper community. Now, I don't know like how nostalgic I am when I look back, like when I was a child, so 30 years ago, when I was like a young child, 7 years old. I feel like community existed more. Like even as I got into my like early teens, we had youth centers. Youth centers don't exist anymore, do they? We had like community centers. So I used to go to a school that was next to a community center that had a gym in it and was a bit of the center of the community. And then you also had, dare I say, and there'll be a lot of people here that really sort of hate alcohol for a lot of different reasons, but the pub was also like the center of the community. And when I first started going into pubs, I lived in like a village, although it was part of like a bigger town, but there was a sense of like community there. And rightly or wrongly, pubs are kind of leaving us now. I think if you were to like predict in 20, 25 years, like village local pubs probably won't exist. And look, I'm sure there's pros and cons to that, but looking from a community perspective, community centers in the way of being a hub of the community don't exist anymore. Once upon a time, there normally was a stay-at-home parent who would raise the children. In most cases, that was the mum or the mothering figure. And they wouldn't have a supermarket or an online place where they could get all of their bits and bobs and get them delivered to the house. They would have to go out and they would visit the butcher and the baker, and like they would bump into people that were in the butchers at the same time. They would know the butcher, and there was this so community was much more organic and sort of easily, naturally established. And then there was religion as well, right? So like I feel like the breakdown of religion, re a place where everybody went on a Sunday to congregate together, to talk about their struggles and to come together under a common bond. With the breakdown of that as well. And again, look, I'm not saying bring back pubs and religion. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just trying to look at the reasons why community in the way that it once existed broke down. Now, of course, like with any system, with any community, with any tribe, these kind of things always come with their own issues as well, right? Abuse thrives actually within systems and communities where you build trust and safety. Abuse can happen, right? So I don't want to be too rose tinted in this as well. I recognize that with community comes hiding spaces for abuse, right? I talk openly about that, about how that can happen. But all of that said, I still believe that the breakdown of community is one of the biggest problems that we see. And so I think we've got to find new ways in this new world that we live in to bring it about. I've got like my online community, right? For example, not the same as meeting in person, but like I think we have to try and do the best that we can with the tools that we've got. I do believe that we need more regular things. So, for example, I play football. My children do lots of my children do sports clubs, right? There's a huge amount of community that comes with that, meeting up with the same people. So when I play, I meet up with all the other players, and a lot of them have partners and might have family. And so then you find yourself in the clubhouse after the game. And when I do it with my children, I manage one of the teams, for example. So you're interacting with lots of the parents. The children within these sports clubs get to interact with other adults, which is really healthy for them, right? Other adults that potentially have the chance to be emotionally available for them. And, the obvious and saying that you hear a lot is that it takes a village to raise a child. And I'm going to go on to one of my other points that will kind of heavily link to this. But the more that we can bring about the proper community, proper trusting community, the better chance children have. When I speak to children that have grown up particularly in alcoholic homes where there is a parent who has addiction, and so even if it's a two-parent family, the parent in the addiction is often trapped in the addiction, and then the other parent is like lost and trapped in that addiction as well. Most of the people that have gone on to carve out decent lives and have not got lost in that trauma in addiction and God knows what else as a result of that trauma, they will always cite a grandparent or some other emotionally available adult that pulled them through. I talk about my drama teacher and the impact that they had on my life. So, there's lots of studies out there. I don't have any of them here because I'm only just thinking of this as I talk, right? But that showed that the huge impact that one emotionally available, loving adult can have on a child. So, like, when we think about healing, when we think about trying to break generational trauma, when we think about where does all this mental health, what we call mental health problems, where do they stem from and how do we prevent them? I do believe that at the heart of that is community, right? How do we create communities so that our children have as many emotionally available adults as humanly possible in their lives to give them the best opportunity to grow up to be the version of themselves that they want to be? I do think we have a crisis of identity in the world at the moment. There is, it feels a bit like, without going too kind of off the beaten track here, it does feel like there's this breakdown of community, of politics, right? So when we're thinking about identity, if you go back 20 years, I think people were very fixed or very strong in their kind of being a conservative in the UK or being Labour. Whereas now, I think a lot of people don't know where to hang their hat. And that's when these kind of extreme views come in, because we seek to be accepted, we seek to be part of something. But these kind of demographics, these kind of groups of people through that political lens don't feel very welcoming to a lot of people, because they've all become quite extreme themselves. And so people feel politically homeless. And then when people aren't listened to and we can't come together, I mean, again, look, I don't want to be too nostalgic here, but I remember when I first started drinking in pubs, right? So 20 years ago, you'd had old Davey in the corner who had some fucking weird views that you didn't like, but he was Davey and he was all right. You sort of knew his heart was good. I mean, he said some fucking stupid shit. I'm making Davey up, right? He said some stupid shit, but he had a good heart. And so you sort of knew, don't listen to him when he talks about X, Y, and Z, but he's got a good heart. He's a good man. And then you had the other person over here who was a bit brash and a bit sweary and a bit, loved a bit of a fight, but, was looked after his family and had good morals. And there were different characters who you didn't necessarily see eye to eye with in every respect, but within that community, they brought something to the table, and you knew that underlying lots of parts of them that you disliked, there was a heart in there that you knew had good intentions. And I feel like we've lost that, right? I feel like we've lost care if somebody has good intentions. In today's world, it's a bit like, fuck your intentions. You said the wrong thing. And so that's it. We all hate you now. And I talk about toxic people, but I think most of us in the main, on the whole, we all have good and bad in us. Like, we are all capable of doing terrible things. We're all capable of doing amazing things, right? And even the best of people that do look, I do think that there are people that are right up here that are able to just do amazing things. Like, you meet them now and then, right? Who are just wonderful people who you just know, you can sense, and you get a feeling that they would never harm anybody. They would never do anything that would cause anybody any hurt in any way, irrespective of how they felt, right? They're up here. Those people exist. I think the opposite people exist, who are like terrible fucking toxic people, like I talk about in a lot of my content. But I think most of us sit somewhere like there in the middle there. Like, most of us, I like to think I'm a good person, but fuck me, sometimes I look in the mirror and think, what are you playing at? Like, how have you done that, right? And that's where the kind of healing work is, right? Is to like try and look at this stuff. How do I be better? How do I not do this? How do I look myself in the eye and love myself through these things so that I stop doing them, right? So there's good and bad in all of us, and so that's why healing happens in community. This idea is a very materialistic idea, driven, I think, by sort of hyper-capitalism, that healing can only happen in one-to-one therapy with a trained therapist. Look, I'm doing some one-to-one stuff myself at the moment, but so I'm not saying you don't need it. I'm not saying it's not part of the armory, but to suggest, which they do try, people try and suggest this, that anything that you're struggling with should be with your therapist over here and only done in that way, is bullshit, man. The real healing, you go in there and do your stuff over there potentially if you're working through some stuff in that way. But the true healing happens in how you relate to people when you go out to be in the community, in and amongst other trusting people, in and amongst people where you feel like you can say the wrong thing, where you feel like you can bring naivety, where you feel like you can slip up, do something bad. And there's a sense there that we can move through that together and still recognize that we're lovable. So community would be at the center of everything that I did. I think we're starting to realize that people are yearning for it. One of the ways that I think you can realize that is that there's now lots of people building community in that kind of capitalist way. If you type in on LinkedIn, or probably Google, but definitely LinkedIn, how to build community, one of the first things you'll see is how to build community and maximize profit out of it. But the fact that people are seeing that, and that's on the rise in that space, shows that people have cottoned on to the fact that we're yearning for it. And when people yearn for something, then they'll fucking probably pay for it. And listen, I think that we need to find ways to have people run communities where they can make money to do it, right? That's why you have to, I charge for my community, obviously. But again, there's spectrums of ways to do that. Okay. Number two. I've written these down. So we move away from the over-pathologization of everything and start to look at people's struggles as symptoms of social issues. Now, let me be really, really clear here before I jump into this rabbit hole. There are lots of people who have very difficult struggles as a result of genetic factors, as a result of differences within their biology, right? I absolutely know that to be true. That's patently clear and obvious. But I do worry that what we've done now is opened up this whole realm of there's no such thing as like a slight difference in your personality anymore. We sort of pathologize that straight away, right? We jump straight down to, oh, this must be something that's wrong with this person's brain. Like we see the rise of depression, and instead of thinking, fucking hell, man, there must be something wrong with the way that we're living. So many people are killing themselves, and particularly men and all that. Like we go, oh, what mental health problem do they have? And we've sort of taught people now that when they're struggling emotionally, irrespective of what's going on in their life, we will then, teach people to frame that as struggling with your mental health. So somebody might be in a marriage that they hate their fucking job, have a child that has extra needs, so they're really going through it with that, and they struggle. They feel anxious a lot. They feel down a lot. Every Sunday they have to think about going to work on a Monday because they spend most of their life in a place that they hate, potentially with people that they hate. And then when they come home, they're in a marriage that's like loveless and like that's broken down. And then on top of that, because they're struggling emotionally from that, we then go, oh, your mental health struggling, as if like the way that you're feeling is some kind of failure, some kind of way that your body's letting you down, rather than thinking you feel fucking appropriate based on your experience. And actually, I would go so far as to say potentially what's going on here is your body screaming at you, making you feel a certain way to try and get you to fucking act and to do something. One of the problems that we have in our society today is that we've now built a society where people are locked in those fucking systems. People are locked in their jobs. Many people don't really have the power to leave their job for a whole bunch of different reasons. And some people are very financially trapped in relationships as well, right? And I know there's always a way out in both of those things. But it takes a certain level of being able to have certain like metrics of needs met to be able to do those things. So people are like trapped in this feeling. And I'm not going to get too much into it today, but again, hypercapitalism, right? The pathologization and medicalization of your emotional distress is big business. So rather than looking at this social issue and going, right, we got a lot of people that are growing up feeling lost, feeling like they haven't developed a healthy sense of self. And a healthy sense of self is something that we are supposed to naturally develop as human beings, right? We're supposed to develop a core sense of self. But lots of people are reaching adulthood having not done that. Why is that? What's wrong with the way that we're living? But instead we go, oh, well, even though this is like a new rise of this coming, we're going to say that it's a problem with the brain and we're going to sort of medicalize it. And again, this isn't to say that anybody's experiences aren't real and aren't true. They fucking are real and they are true. I just believe that we need to further look at the reasons why all these things are happening. And I'm genuinely not talking about any specific, I mean, I've mentioned depression. And I saw somebody online recently say that when you're depressed, it's because you're repressed. Being depressed is like being repressed. You're having to repress who you truly are and your body's screaming at you to do something. Look, it sounds perhaps a little bit cliche and overly simplistic, but I think we should be exploring that stuff a lot more than what we do. But we live in a culture now where somebody may have built the kind of life that I've just talked about in a job that they hate and all that kind of stuff. And then they're on medication that have potentially huge side effects for their depression because they can't leave their job. So we're just medicating them. And how different is that to them going to the street corner and buying drugs? Well, the only difference is that it's like can be kind of regulated in how much they're given and how much they take and what's going in there, and they can make sure that the medication is quote unquote safe, right? It's not too much of a leap from those two things. And so I like, again, this isn't everybody. I'm not saying everybody that has a mental health struggle has nothing wrong with their brain and it's just a reaction to a social struggle. I think in every case, actually, it's a cocktail of lots of different factors. But I think that we don't focus on the social factors at a policy level. And the reason the social factors aren't focused on at a policy level is because if we were to focus on them, then it fucking takes investment, right? The other way, when we over-pathologize and over-medicalize people's distress and people's struggles, then people get to profit off of that. So number two for me is to move away from the over-pathologization and medicalization of stuff, and to come home to looking at what is wrong with the way that we're living. What is it about our society that is creating so much distress in people? So yeah, that's number two. Number three. I've put quite simply to promote curiosity over absolutes. There's this real drive in today's world to have absolutes. I mean, I talked recently on the podcast about the discussion I had over Stephen Bartlett having people on his podcast that were deemed misinformation, that were talking about misinformation. And I sort of, like, I understand that, right? I can make rational, logical sense out of that. That somebody says, if somebody is going on Stephen Bartlett and talking about misinformation, like, I don't know, talking about a particular cure for cancer, which isn't proven, right? Then people that are vulnerable are susceptible to taking bad advice. Like, I understand that, right? And like, there's so much more going on in the world than what's going on Stephen Bartlett's podcast. So there's this like selective sort of moral outrage that I'm trying to make sense of at the moment. Like, since the beginning of time, there's been books available with alternative views. Like, we need alternative views. And if we take the idea of the cancer patient who is vulnerable to misinformation, rather than calling out Stephen Bartlett for having a bit of a dodgy guest on his episode, we should be looking at why potentially anybody that was engaging in medical advice has lost trust in that medical advice. Now, I looked recently, and in fact, can I check it now? Because I haven't got it with me, but I'm going to just type it in here. I was looking at the amount of fines and penalties that pharmaceutical companies had, right? And let's have a look at it here. So I've got the violation tracker for Pfizer, right? And their penalty total since 2000, so in the last 25 years, they have been fined £11.2 billion, and half of that is for safety-related offences. So then I look at that and I'm like, you could, if anybody, a patient of any kind, is vulnerable to misinformation, I would argue that the small piece of that puzzle is what we might deem misinformation over there. The big piece of that puzzle is the fact that these big corporate medical companies that we, in most cases, have absolutely no choice or feel like we have no choice but to trust, have become very mistrustful. That's the bigger piece of the puzzle. And so when we live within these kind of systems, and again, I'm not against the systems where we have power structures and people that run the country and stuff like that. I'm not actually wholly against them. But power, where there's power, there will always be abuse, because power is of all the behaviors and substances and anything, power is the single most addictive. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And so I think we should always be looking for curiosity. And like, a bit of mysticism's good, man. Like, we don't understand most of the human brain. So like, why are we, I think like there's such a discomfort with the idea that life happens somewhere in the gray area, most of it, or a lot of it at least. Curiosity frightens us and we want absolutes all of the time. And then you get this kind of like, what you might call groupthink, which is where nobody like contests the common narrative. And if you do test the common narrative, or look at things in a different way, or try and see things from a different point of view, you risk being ostracized. And those in power know that. So they will ostracize you. And then that keeps everybody on the simple path. If that makes sense. And I just think we should get back to the idea that we welcome opposing opinions. Like, I love different opinions. I love hearing somebody else. And I love thinking to myself, how the fuck can you believe that? How can you believe that? But we should be able to do that and then come back to a bit like what I was saying earlier about Davey in the pub, you know? Mate, you can believe that if you want. I think you're fucking stupid for believing it. But you're all right. You know, I know in your heart you want what, like, it's like when you look at the left and the right? Most of them, apart from the extreme ends of the two of them, most of them want the same thing, which is for us to live in harmony and for us to have the best, what's right for us, right? They just look at it from different ways. And so we need to, come back to curiosity. Curiosity brings, helps us come together more. I believe it does. But people always want to avoid the uncomfortable truth, because the uncomfortable truth is uncomfortable. And we go to great lengths to avoid the truth. And we see that in every aspect of society. So number 4, this is going on quite a lot longer than I thought it would. And I am running out of time before I've got to be on breathing space. So number 4, go back to children being the most important demographic in society. This one's quite simple. I'm not going to say too much about it. I feel like we are the first generation in the history of society who no longer places children at the center of the universe. Like, I just don't think they get talked about anymore. Like, if you look at the American election, I mean, I wasn't too invested in that. Like, I was seeing that from a very top line view. So I was only seeing what's going on, but I didn't see children mentioned throughout the whole of the big C word that we probably shouldn't talk about because the podcast might get suppressed. I don't know, or told it's got misinformation in it. But like through that whole thing, through the pandemic, children weren't really mentioned, were they? And then when the last election in England, children weren't mentioned. I just don't understand why it's not like that anymore. Nobody seems to care about children anymore. Not in the way that we should. Surely, I believe you should judge any demographic of people by the way that they treat their children. And I think in the UK, at least, because that's the one that I know enough about, I think we're a fucking disgrace. Like, everybody goes, yeah, the schooling system's broken. It's like, yeah, but what the fuck are we doing about it? And it's because I think everybody goes, oh, we need to rip it up and start it again. We need to make incremental changes. We need to be pushing our fucking governments. That's what we need to do as individuals, is push our governments to be investing adequately and properly in them. Surely. Like, at the election, it should be like, what are you doing for the kids, man? But they just seem, I don't know, man. I think our culture's becoming the big N word. So much so narcissistic, so individualistic. We look at everybody as individuals now. We just think everybody's got the same chance in life, and we just leave it at that. And if you fuck it up, it's on you. Like, that's it, Everybody's like, I was down my cards and I made it through, so, the fuck you gonna do about it? Why can't we, like, come back home to ourselves and to the children? And then finally, and this is just based around the work that I do, I believe that we need to stare dysfunction in the face and start to promote accountability. Accountability is the big word for me here. Again, I believe that the main majority of people have good and bad in them. I believe that we all have good and bad in us. I believe we're all capable of doing things we really fucking wish that we didn't. I think as people, we need more compassion for ourselves in those moments. We need more compassion for one another. We need to understand how complex life is and how people do mess up, man. And we need to have compassion for those people and help them back up and give them the support that they need, right? I believe that there are, like I've said before, but I'll say it again, there are people at the top end of the scale that really are amazing and do so much good and barely ever do bad at all, and we should hold on to those people and be thankful for them. There are people at the opposite end that I talk regularly about in my content who just probably will never ever change and are horrible and toxic, and we should see them for who they are as well. But running through all of this is accountability. And accountability is like the kind of word that we often miss. It's the hardest thing, man. Like when I look at addiction, and I look at the people that I've lost to it, and I've lost a lot because I've been in recovery spaces now for over 12 years. Some of them even do take accountability and we still lose them. So that's like the enigma. But accountability should be central, man. But we should allow people the grace of having accountability. And I think this is what children of toxic parents do, right? Children of toxic parents are just trying to if you take accountability, I'm going to help you. This is what loving, caring people do. If you're willing to take accountability, I'll work with you back towards restoration. The people at the toxic end will never do that. Don't never do that. That's one of the problems that you have. But I worry that we are losing the ability to help those in the middle to work through their struggles with accountability. In a lot of cases, I think to take accountability, people need to feel like there's support in that. You know, life is complex. People get lost. People find themselves in down paths and in places where they didn't mean to be, you know? And we need to look at accountability. And I think one of the reasons that it's really hard to promote accountability is because, you know, we're all, you know, scared of accountability, right? Because it means staring yourself in the face. What does accountability mean? It means looking myself in the eye and saying, let me look at all my shadow. And I think we're terrified of that. I think we're all terrified of that. And you know, I think that as somebody who's recovered from or is still recovering from so much chaos that I lived in my life, I had to realize that, you know, I'm not a bad person, but I did some bad things. And, you know, I have a knowing of what I'm capable of. And then you have to just try and take accountability for that and try and still love yourself and move forward in life. So it's hard. It's hard to push accountability, to be accountable. But I do think that the easier, softer route means that you miss out on life. I really do think that. Okay, in terms of time, I'm not going to be able to answer all of these questions, but let's do this first one here. So maybe we'll do two. When you have very limited contact with parents due to abuse, how can you be yourself around them when you see them? What I mean is, it's very hard to not instantly be on the defense or in fight or flight. So is there any way of getting past that to make it feel less toxic and also show them my actual self and character, as they only see the version that they have created, but my defensiveness makes this worse and it's not who I am today? And then it says in brackets, we had no contact, but illness with a family member has changed that. Hope that makes sense. And it does make sense. It does make sense. This is really important. This is why I talk about within the family. I know that no contact is the only option for some people, but then in some people's cases that no contact really sort of isn't tenable either. And so you have to see them. So let me just try and answer the question. I don't think you need to be yourself when you're around them. I think if they are really the high-end, toxic, dysfunctional people that I talk about, I think you need to be whatever you need to be in order to survive being with them. And if that means gratifying them a little bit, I think in many ways that's your only option. There'll be people out there that'll say that that's bad advice, but family situations are really, really complex. And so you just got to be whatever you need to be in that situation. From what I can gather from what you're saying here, we had no contact, but now you have to be contact due to like family illness. This is making the best of a bad situation. They will never, you also said, how do I show them my actual self and character? If they're the toxic, horrible people that I'm talking about, they'll never see the true you and your character. They will only see you through the lens that they need to see you through in order to keep themselves where they want to be. So maybe sometimes you feel like I'm not being real, I'm being fake because I'm having to be like that. I think you need to be whatever you need to be in order to be able to get through those situations. The fight or flight is a body thing, so try and get some somatic practices. Remember to be able to control your breath. Focus on your breath like we did at the beginning of this podcast as much as you can when you're in those situations, to try not to go too far into fight or flight, but then also understand that you will go there. You will go to fight or flight. It's going to happen. It's inevitable in many respects, because that's what they do. And this is one of the things that people don't understand about abuse, is that abuse is so subtle. It's way beyond words. Like, there is a manipulation of the energy, right? These toxic people have the ability to sort of deeply tune into the ways that you're feeling. You know, that hypervigilance that I've talked about in the past, where you're so in tune with the whole room and you're trying to distort yourself to make other people feel better and to work out how you need to be. Remember that toxic people are doing the same thing, but they're tuned into it and then using it only to their advantage. Yeah. So you have to understand that that's the level of what you're dealing with, and then be gentle with yourself. I'm going to do this one more question, and then we'll save the rest. the other. I've got so many, but we'll save the 3 that I had written down for next week. And I get asked this a lot, but do you think the words toxic and narcissist and gaslighting, all of these words and terminology is overused? Here's what I think. This is my answer. I think they are overused by people in the wrong spaces and underused in the spaces where they actually need to be used. In a lot of cases, it's so hard to use them for the people that actually deserve them, because if you say it out loud, there's a reaction, and so you keep it to yourself, because that's what abuse does. It's about power and control. Yeah, it's about power and control, and this is why the enablers are such a problem, because people can't talk their truth. They can't say the truth that this person is toxic, horrible, and abusive, because if they do, then there is a reaction. There is always a fucking payoff. So the people that need to use it to label who they're actually fucking dealing with never get to use it. But you know who do gets to use it, because there's no comeback, is the fucking toxic, horrible people themselves. So they will use it. You'll see them using it regularly. So then, yes, it does get overused. It gets overused and misused quite often by the fucking people that are like projecting their own shit onto other people. Not always. And so like it does become problematic in that way. I know when I'm talking about toxic parents and people eye roll at me, and you know, I know that. I know that I can see from when I've released the book and I look at the sphere, I'm ostracized from healing spaces. I'm ostracized in a lot of way by academics and professionals in this space, because it's kind of an eye roll, and it's just it's a movement, and like, you know, it's the younger generation, social media and all that kind of shit. I fucking know that. I see it. Sometimes it fucking bothers me, as you can probably tell. But to come back to the answer to the question, I think it's overused in some ways, but underused when it's fucking needed. And that's the point. And that's why I be so clear and I be so blunt about stuff, because sometimes, and I've talked through this whole podcast about how things often happen in the black and white in the middle. Sometimes, particularly when it comes to abuse, we need to let people talk very clearly and very directly about their experience, because that's how they fucking move through it. That's how they have the opportunity to know that it's real. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up here. I hope everybody has got through Christmas in the way that they can, and that you had a good new year. And looking forward to this podcast next year. We're going to be introducing a lot with it over time. Anyway, we will be. So yeah, once again, as always, I've been Josh Connolly, and this was definitely dysfunctional. I did tell you it would be dysfunctional. So thank you for sticking around till the end here. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, then please help me to grow Dysfunctional by sharing with your friends on social media. You can find me at Josh_FFW. And then wherever you're listening to this or watching this, please make sure that you've liked and subscribed, left us a 5-star review and a comment if your platform allows it. And I'll see you on the next one.